Hi everyone, today I'm going to give you my thoughts on the new Diansheng FTO after getting it and solving on it for the last week or so. This is the first video of this style that I've done, so it'd be great to hear from you guys if you like it and you want to see any more like this in the future on any specific puzzles. Firstly, I want to give a bit of context as to this puzzle's release, because I think that's important with regards to how this puzzle was anticipated over the last few months. For years and years now, the only real option if you wanted to buy an FTO was the Landman, which was just like any other 10-year-old non-WCA puzzle, in that it was barely usable out of the box. It was extremely tight, clunky, and had a very primitive mechanism that meant any attempt at loosening it would most likely result in frequent pops and explosions. It functioned, but that was about it, and you certainly couldn't really speed solve on it. So, with the growing interest in FTO, alongside the growing interest in cubing as a whole over the pandemic, the first solution to this hardware problem was to modify the Landman. This is what I did to mine, and despite following the excellent tutorial by Ben Puzzles, it was still a painstaking process. I sanded down the individual pieces to try to make the puzzle turn smoother, replaced the springs with a weaker set I had laying around, possibly from a Dayan box but I'm not sure, and dumped a load of Traxxas in it. This did indeed make the turning somewhat more comfortable, but only in the same way that falling down the stairs is comfortable. Sure, carpet might be a bit nicer than concrete, but when your head hits the ground you're just going to wish you'd taken the lift. And that's where the Diansheng comes in. It's the more modern, more technical and more comfortable lift to the Landland's concrete staircase. Even with the construction of the first Rex TOs, which was a modification kit for the Chi Super Ivy cube that extended the pieces into an FTO, these were incredibly expensive and much less accessible than the Landland, so many people such as me didn't bother. The Diansheng though is a welcome breath of fresh air. The box is wonderfully simple. You get the puzzle, an extra set of slightly stronger springs, and an instruction leaflet. No unnecessary extras, which I really appreciate. The puzzle itself is also brilliantly simple, because it doesn't need to be extravagant or have any fancy features. It has glossy plastic, none of the stupid frosted or UV finishes that seem to be the only options for most cubes these days, just simple normal plastic. The colours are nice and bright, and the colour scheme makes sense. Red is opposite to orange, blue to green, white to yellow, and purple to grey, which makes it much more similar than the Landland scheme to other WCA puzzles, and therefore hopefully easier to get used to. Just personally, I would have loved to have seen pink used instead of grey, because I think it overall makes the puzzle look a lot nicer, but this isn't a huge deal. It's a little bit smaller than the Landland, but I haven't found this difficult at all to get used to. The turning has a slight bump to it, but its smoothness is far superior to a modded Landland, and certainly on par with, if not better than a Rex TO. It's also much lighter than the Landman, which means long solving sessions will be far more comfortable. The magnets have a strong click, but this works well in a puzzle as naturally fast as this one. If, like me, you haven't owned a Rex TO before, the new speed may be harder to get used to compared to the Landland, but after just a few solves I found that the turning does flow relatively well. This has the added bonus that the puzzle is significantly more finger trick friendly than the Landland, which makes for a better and easier overall solving experience. I took the puzzle apart, initially out of curiosity, but also because I wanted to see how easy the colour scheme was to change, because although I do like the Diansheng colour scheme, I am much more used to my own. The caps for the edges and corners were fairly easy to remove, but especially the corners were a huge pain to actually take apart, and I don't think this mechanism needed to be made so complicated. It is certainly possible, and there are tutorials on how to do this if you are curious, but be warned, it's pretty difficult, and you'll likely find that your fingers feel somewhat like you've just done a handstand on some Lego after you've finished. I also swapped out the springs for the other set that came in the box, and for some reason they give you 9 of the strongest springs for a puzzle with 8 sides. I guess if you lose one then it would help, but you still only get 8 of the standard strength springs in the puzzle. This spring swap is a very easy process to do, as there are again very few individual components to this puzzle. There are no washers in the centerpieces, but perhaps this could be an opportunity for a future hardware upgrade to bring in. I do know one of my friends, Ed Dibley, was able to request that Diansheng included some stronger springs in the box, as he found the out-of-the-box springs much less easy to work with. But personally, I'm the other way around. I found that to combat the stronger feeling of the extra springs, I needed to have the puzzle on slightly looser tensions, but in turn this encouraged more pops, and the puzzle felt generally less stable, so I switched back to the regular springs. My setup has been very simple. I've mainly used Traxxas 50K across all contact surfaces of the pieces, supplemented by a few drops of XMT10 to exploit the puzzle's natural speed, and this has worked very well for me so far. This puzzle is not without its flaws though, chief among which being the corner cutting, or lack thereof. Forwards corner cutting is very minimal, and reverse is non-existent, and this leads to quite a lot of catching. Unfortunately, this problem doesn't seem to be solvable by loosening the puzzle or swapping to the other springs, as the springs in the puzzle have a very small range of usability. What I've found is that if the puzzle is much tighter than it comes out of the box, the catching worsens and it feels a lot more clunky to use. And this is in danger of being sort of reminiscent of land qualities, which is never something you'd want to liken a puzzle to. On the flip side, much looser than out of the box, and the puzzle is very prone to popping and sometimes exploding, which has happened to me a few times already. I'm not quite sure why pops are this common. My best guess would be that it's something to do with the internal mechanism of the pieces, but I'm afraid I'm not much of an expert in this area. So for this reason, I'd recommend keeping the puzzle fairly close to the tensions it comes with out of the box. You might be able to get away with loosening it or tightening it about half a turn either way, but beyond that I don't think the puzzle is particularly usable, even for someone like me who likes their puzzles fairly loose. On top of this more significant issue, I could have made this video into a more critical assessment of the Diansheng, as there are people who have expressed a continued preference for the FTO despite this puzzle's release. I could have put far more emphasis on just how annoying it is to change the colour scheme, or that for most people I don't think the extra springs will be much use, or the never-ending possibility of your FTO popping, or the speed and the strong magnets also proving more volatile for other solvers to work with and get used to. But I didn't want to make a video like that. Although I've always wanted to be fair with my opinions, why make this review if I'm going to gloss over or play down the flaws of this puzzle? Well, quite simply, none of that matters. I can gloss over most of the flaws of this puzzle because honestly, they don't really matter. What matters is that this puzzle exists at all. To return to my earlier metaphor, for centuries, the only real way to ascend any kind of building or slope was by some form of steps. But it wasn't always pleasant, especially the further you had to go. They made your calves ache, and if you slipped, your life could suddenly become very unpleasant. Then they invented the lift. And yeah, it wasn't perfect, of course. It probably wasn't close to perfect, but it was far more accessible. It used technology to improve on an existing problem. It was less tiring over long distances. And yeah, lifts are much harder to install. They need more work. Sometimes they break down, and you get that silly voice telling you things you already know, like that the doors are closing. But none of that matters, because it pales in comparison to how much nicer the experience is than anything that came before it. The Diansheng is not perfect by any means, but it didn't need to be. The only thing this puzzle needed to really do was exist and be usable, because it represents two very, very important things. Firstly, it'll be a vital first stepping stone in the future improvement of FTO hardware. No other event or puzzle has gone straight from its first prototype to the equivalent of the Moyu RS3 MV5 or the GAN 562. You need something to build and improve off of, and the Diansheng FTO is exactly that. And secondly, and possibly even more importantly, it shows that finally we have a cube manufacturer that is willing to listen to a small community of solvers, throw caution to the wind, and have a go at making a brand new puzzle. I won't sit here and say that it was any kind of a business risk to launch this puzzle, but FTO certainly does not yet have the same calibre as really any other WCA puzzle, and several other non-WCA puzzles. If anyone from Diansheng happens to see this, I'd like to take this opportunity on behalf of the FTO solving community and beyond to say a massive, massive thank you for listening, for just having a go, because this puzzle didn't need to be anything crazy or special, it just needed to exist. And also, Dayan already have an FTO in the works as well, so hopefully we might see the floodgates open as the other manufacturers' expertise begins to pour in. I don't think I can really express how big of an impact this puzzle will have on FTO solving. It's as good as, if not better than a RexTO for a fifth of the price. It's sensible, it's functional, it's accessible, it's vibrant, it's exciting, and it's paving the way for a very, very interesting future for FTO. Diansheng, thank you for taking this chance. I hope off the back of this that FTO can grow even more and even be considered as a new WCA event one day. But let's keep this puzzle in mind. Years down the line, should that future ever come to fruition, let's not forget where it started. It will all be because of this puzzle. The innovation, the revolution that is the Diansheng FTO. Thanks for watching.